Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where I share some tutorials on making games in LÖVE 2D. So today we're going to do our part 2 of implementing our physics engine, Box 2D, in our game. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to implement some interaction between our skiers and our Yeti. And I thought, a good way to start this video was to kind of recall what we did with our AABB collision framework. So essentially what we had, right, was our Yeti and our skier. If the Yeti aligned itself with the skier would stop moving. And then if the squares on top of our Yeti overlap the square on top of the skier, it would trigger the Yeti eating animation. And so this was good. It was a pretty good implementation. We could have kind of developed it further, but we wanted to play around with the physics engine Box 2D and kind of learn how to implement that into a game. And so what we're going to do essentially is we're going to try to replicate the same behavior here, where when the Yeti and the skier collide, we'll trigger the Yeti to eat the skier. So maybe let me pull up what we currently have in our game. So when we press the space bar, it summons the skier, and then what we have is our two colliders here, our skier and our Yeti. They collided, and the skier is slowly drifting away from the Yeti. But when they first collided, this was an opportunity for our Yeti to trigger the eating animation. And so that's what we're going to do. So in order to do that, we're essentially going to use something called callback functions. And so in Box 2D, we essentially have 4 types of callbacks, but we're just gonna use 2 today. So first, we're gonna essentially set those callbacks. So what you do is you do world : set callbacks, and then we're gonna have a begin contact and then an end contact. And so essentially what this is when the collision first happens, there's going to be something that happens or gets triggered. And then when the Yeti is no longer colliding or touching the skier, something else happens. So now that we've called these 2, we're essentially going to go all the way to the bottom of our code. And we're essentially going to create our functions. So we're going to do function begin contact. It's going to take an A argument, a B argument, and then the collision argument. Our A and B are going to represent the collider types. So it's going to be essentially our Yeti and our skier for now. But technically, our A and B could be any collider type that we eventually want to create. And so then we'll do the same thing with end contact. Boom. A, B, call. Perfect. So now that we've done that, one of the things that we need to do, right, is we need to be able to identify what colliders are colliding, essentially. So essentially, what are our A and Bs? And so to do that, we essentially need to use something called user data. And so user data is actually a way to enrich information on our fixtures. And so what you can essentially do is on our Yeti fixture, what we can do is we can do set user data. And then the cool thing with the user data is it actually takes a table argument. And so what we can do, I think I need to capitalize the T here. What you can do is you can pass in a bunch of variables if you want to kind of enrich the collision detection piece. But we're going to keep it simple today. We're just going to do Yeti. So essentially, now our Yeti fixture has a value of Yeti. The next thing we're going to do is we're essentially going to take this and we're going to implement it to our skier. Boom. And so this one, essentially we need to index into our skier table. And then we want our first one, and then or ith one, and then skier fixture. Oh, and I'm seeing, so there's something that I kind of am realizing we're inserting our fixture outside of our if statement. So essentially our if statement is to kind of track whether a skier is new or not. So if a skier is new, we want to set a fixture, but if the skier is not new, we don't want to set a fixture. So right now we're setting a fixture no matter if the skier is new or not. So I'm gonna take this and I'm just gonna move it into our if else, and then maybe to make it a little bit more recognizable, we're gonna call it is new. Set that to true, and then we're just gonna flip it. So instead of is moving, it's going to just be is new. Oops, so it's a little bit more clean. Perfect. And then we're going to set that to false. Perfect. We're actually going to delete our projectile code because we no longer are really doing anything with our projectile. So the other thing here for the user data, we've got Yeti. We're going to change that to our skier. So now essentially when we look for an A and a B in our begin or end contact callback functions, we're essentially going to look for the skier and then the Yeti names or types. So now that we've got those, we can kind of go back to our callback function and we can essentially in here start creating that logic. So what we're going to do inside of our function, we're essentially going to create a types table, and this one's going to essentially take our user data types, and we're going to use essentially we're going to compare different keys inside of this table to find. Essentially, we're trying to find our fixtures. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do types. I'm going to do a, and I'm going to do get user data, and then we just want the first value, which is essentially Yeti or skier. We're going to set this to true. So essentially, when A and B collide, we're essentially going to have both the type A and the type B set to true. So if types Yeti, right, is true, so in the case like if one of these is true, if Yeti exists, and types skier is true, also kind of the other one gets put in here, then we're essentially going to do some kind of collision action. And so in this case, right, what we want to do is we want to modify the fixture, because what we're trying to do, right, is we're trying to have the Yeti eat the skier. And what that means essentially is we need to take the skier body that collided with the Yeti. We need to destroy that skier. So essentially we remove that skier from the screen. And then we want to trigger the Yeti animation. So what we need to do is, when you press the space bar, you generate a lot of skiers. You can generate a lot of skiers and a lot of fixtures. We need to find the one skier fixture that we need to remove from our skier fixture table. And so to do that, what we can do is we can do local skier fixture. We're just going to call it skier fixture here. And what we can do is we can do get user data. Boom. So essentially if the body A is our skier, essentially is equal to skier, then we want to assign our skier fixture inside of our begin contact function to A. If body A is not our skier and body B is our skier, then we want to assign our skier fixture here to B, or body B. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new table to kind of keep track of which skier fixtures are colliding with the Yeti. So we're just going to call it contact bodies. And what we're going to put in here is we're going to actually put our skier, the skier that collided. So assuming we have a lot of skiers, we're going to pick the one skier body that collided with the Yeti. And we're going to put that skier body into our contact body table. So skier fixture, and then we're going to essentially just do get body. Perfect. And then what we're going to do is we're essentially going to just take all of this. So this is when a collision first happens. So when a collision first happens, we're tracking which skier collided with our Yeti using our contact bodies table. When the collision ends, essentially if the skier and the Yeti separate, what we want to do is we want to remove that skier from the table. So to do that, essentially it's the same thing. We look for the types Yeti and skier collision. We want to get our skier fixture, but then all we're going to do is essentially table.remove, and we're going to do contact bodies. Well, actually, first we need to make sure that there was a collision here. So if contact bodies is greater than 0, then we are going to remove the entry. In this case, essentially, since contact bodies is just a collection of the skier fixtures that have collided with the Yeti, we're just going to remove the skier fixture from the collision, from our contact bodies table, which is what we're tracking our collisions in. Okay, so now I'm going to take contact bodies. I'm going to go all the way back to the top, and we are going to create the contact bodies table. I'm going to initialize it to empty. Okay, so now what we actually do have is we have a way to check whether or not our Yeti and our skier or skiers are colliding, and we're actually tracking which skier is colliding with the Yeti. And so essentially what we can do, right, is we can, now that we've tracked this in our update function, we can implement or apply changes to that skier, to that specific skier body or skier fixture. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to remove all of our projectile code because we are no longer using it. So it's just going to clean up our code a little bit. And what we are going to do is we're going to essentially, if we track what we want to do, right, we want to take the skier that collided with the Yeti and we want to remove that skier from the screen. Or what we can do is just destroy that skier. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new table that gets at every moment that, because this is in the update function, every moment is essentially going to be reinitialized to an empty table. And essentially if there is a contact, so now that we have our contact bodies table, we can essentially check it. If there is a collision detected between a skier and a Yeti, then what we're going to do is we're going to insert that specific skier that collided with our Yeti into our destroyed skier table. So I'm going to table.insert destroy skier, and then we're going to essentially just take our contact bodies and we just want our first one. Perfect. And then I'm just going to do end. So now essentially what we've done, right, is we're tracking which skier is colliding with our Yeti, and then we're taking the skier that collided with the Yeti and we're putting that skier into a destroy skier table. Now that we've done that, essentially we want to actually implement the destroy function. So essentially for k bodies in essentially our pairs of destroy skiers. So essentially now we're just looping through our destroy skier table. What we're going to do is we're going to check whether or not the body is already destroyed. So there's a flag essentially that tells you like whether a fixture is destroyed or not in Box2D. And so we can call And essentially, if the body is not destroyed, we are going to destroy it. So we just call the function is destroyed. So this is going to tell us whether or not the body is destroyed. And then if it's not, we're just going to do it. We're just going to destroy it. Destroy. Perfect. Oops. Oh my gosh. And an end. All right. So now we've added the skiers that have collided to our destroy skiers, and now we've checked whether they're destroyed or not, and if they are not destroyed, then we are destroying them. Now that we've destroyed them, we can essentially remove them from our skier table, where essentially we've first created them. So if we kind of go back up here, we first created their body and shape inside of skier table, and then we've created the skier fixture to the skier fixture table. So what we want to do is we want to clean up these tables to remove them from those tables. And when we do that, they're going to essentially disappear from the screen. So what I can do is for I, in essentially in the however many skiers we've initialized. So, if we've pressed the space bar 10 times, there'll be 10 skiers here. We're going to start from our 10th skier, work our way back down to our first skier, and in an increment of -1. Essentially, if the skier that we are now incrementing across of, essentially, if that body, right, if that skier body now has the flag is destroyed from our for loop above, then we're essentially going to remove them from the table. So we're going to do table.remove, and then we're going to do skier table, and we're going to remove whichever ith skier we're at. We're going to do the exact same thing with our skier fixture table. There we go. And you know what? When this happens, we're just going to score a point. +1. There we go. And perfect. Okay, so normally now if I run this, we get an error. Oh, you know what? I removed all of our projectile stuff, so I need to remove this line of code as well. Let me just delete it. There we go. Okay, so we've got our Yeti, we've got our skier, and so now when a skier collides with our Yeti, it disappears. So cool, so now I'm going to summon a bunch of skiers, and I'm just going to make our Yeti just kind of destroy all of the skiers on the screen. So, this is already like getting more fun. We're scoring points every time we hit a skier, but we haven't implemented our Yeti animation yet. So what we want to do, right, is when the skier and the Yeti collide, we don't want just skier to just disappear. We want the skier to disappear, but we want our Yeti to now be frozen in place and essentially eat or trigger the eating animation. So to do that, essentially what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to define states or character states. So our Yeti essentially is going to have 2 character states. It's going to have one character state where it's free to run around and, collide with a whole bunch of the skiers. And then a second state where essentially it's frozen in place and it's eating the skier. And so to do that, essentially what we're going to go back up to our Yeti where we've created our Yeti. And we're just going to create, I'm going to put it under our Yeti anim, Yeti state. And I'm just going to give it a 1. So 1 means the Yeti is free to run everywhere. And then 2 will be our eating animation. So our eating animation happens when we remove the skier from our tables. So essentially in this loop, when we actually do the removal of the skiers, this will be our Yeti state. Oops. Yeah, state 2. Perfect. And so our Yeti states essentially the parts that are impacted by state 1 and state 2 is essentially these if-else, like the movement if-else statements. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap them in another if statement. So if Yeti state equals 1, then I think I need to put equals 1. Then we are going to let's see if I can auto indent all of these. Nope, I forget how to auto indent. Oh, there we go. Then do all of this. Else, essentially, we're in our eating animation state. And inside of our eating animation state, essentially, we're no longer moving. So we're going to set our vector x, our movement vector, along the x-axis to 0. And we're going to do our vector y along the y-axis equal to 0. And then we are going to trigger our Yeti animation to eating Yeti. There we go. Perfect. So now we've got 2 states for our Yeti. And so if I kind of go here, you'll see, let me summon the skiers. It's triggered the animation and it's kind of going forever and I can't move. So the problem is we haven't kicked back out of state 2, right? So we've collided, we entered state 2, and then we've done our animation, but then we didn't go back to state 1. So what I need to do is I need to call a Yeti state back to 1. The problem is if I do this, you'll see essentially there's not going to be enough time for the Yeti animation to happen, the eating animation to happen. It's just going to skip back to state 1. So you can see like there's a tiny little blur that's happening every time we collide. It's just the very first frame of our animation. So what we need to do is we need to create essentially a timer that essentially gives enough time for the animation to run before going back to state 1. So we're just going to do timer equals timer plus a delta time. And then if our timer is, I think their animation is 6 frames. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with 2 seconds. It's a little bit longer than 1 second. I'm just going to do 1.2. Then we can go back into our Yeti state. And then we essentially reset our timer to 0 so that we can have another collision, or we can eat another skier. So now if we run it, summoning all my skiers, I'm going to collide with 1 skier, and oh, you know what? I forgot to create timer up here. Timer is equal to 0. All right, let's go. So now when we collide, our Yeti is going to be frozen, and I'm not going to be able to move until the animation is over, and then I can chase after the skiers. So this is working pretty well. The thing is, it's a little bit easy to just kind of run at the skier and eat them. So I'm going to implement just one more thing. Essentially, what we want to do is we want the skier to be eaten and destroyed only if we press the return key. So essentially, we need two things to be happening. We need to have a collision and we need to press the return key. So like this essentially forces us to kind of time and click the return key correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do if love.keyboard.isDown. Then we're going to do our return key. Then we can move our skier that's collided with our Yeti to our destroy skier table. And so now, essentially, if I don't press the return key, I'm just going to push the skiers, but if I press the return key, I'm gonna eat the skiers. There we go. Cool. Yeah, so our game is kind of coming together pretty nicely now. So we've implemented, so this is how you implement physics callback for callback functions for essentially managing collisions. I think like what we want to do next time is we're gonna probably use a couple more of our sprites. I've actually been looking at the tree sprites and they look pretty cool. I think I want to do something with them. I also want to implement some of these snow bumps. I think that we could do some cool things with the bumps and some of the skier jumps. And essentially we'll probably do something called sensors, which maybe could be like a part 3 for the Box2D tutorial implementation on our game. But yeah, so I think we've got like some cool stuff in store. And with all that said, I really appreciate you watching this tutorial. Hopefully you're learning a lot and having a lot of fun making this game with me. And yeah, if you do, please like, comment, subscribe, and give me any kind of feedback or anything that you'd like to see in the game. I'd love to work on implementing that. Again, thanks a lot and have a good one.